We're back live tonight. Turn in Focus. Germany has issued an arrest warrant for former Steinhoff CEO Markus Jooste. Bloomberg is reporting that this took place about 2 weeks ago after he failed to appear in court. At the same time, Steinhoff has announced that it will cease to exist in its current form after Dutch courts accepted its restructuring process. The retailer will delist and will be under the control of its creditors. Steinhoff, which was once an investor favorite, has failed to recover from an accounting fraud scandal allegedly caused by Jooste. Let's chat a little bit more about this arrest warrant with legal expert Ulrich Roux. Good to have you, Ulrich, and thank you very much for your time. The ICC issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin, and we've been discussing what needs to happen to this warrant arrest and whether South Africa must act on it. Now, a German court has done the same on Markus Jooste, maybe not the same conditions, but what does it mean for South Africa that this arrest warrant has been issued by a German court?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me. Yes, so the arrest warrant was issued as a result of Markus Jooste not appearing in a criminal court in Germany during April this year. His reasoning for that was because he had handed over his passport to South African authorities, prohibiting him from traveling out of South Africa. The Germans, however, and the German prosecuting authority proceeded to apply for a warrant for his arrest, which was issued approximately 2 weeks ago. Now, of course, the problem lies in the fact that Markus Jooste is in South Africa and he's wanted in a German criminal court. And the next step would be to get him to Germany in order to face those charges. So what they would have to do now is they would have to apply to Interpol, the international policing system, in order for a red notice to be issued for Markus Jooste, so that that red notice can be circulated. And then once he is arrested on that red notice, he will be, for instance, if he is arrested here in South Africa, he will then be detained here, and an inquiry will be conducted here in South Africa whether he should be extradited to Germany or not, in order to face the criminal charges leveled against him there. The alternative to that, of course, would be to willingly hand himself over to the German authorities. So in other words, to make the necessary arrangements with the German prosecutors in order for him to be arrested there, released on bail, and then to stand trial and face the charges that have been leveled against him. So it could be quite a lengthy process still before he is to appear in a German court, and one would have to wait and see, what his negotiations with the German authorities, with his German attorneys as well, come to, and whether he will hand himself over willingly or whether he will wait for, to take his chances and see if that Interpol red notice is indeed issued and whether he is arrested on the strength of that.
So according to some reports, his German lawyer has said that he is willing to travel, but seemingly there is some arrangement with the South African police that he will hand over his passport. What kind of deal is that, and is that something that is done? Has Markus Jooste been arrested in South Africa and therefore he made a deal with the South African police to say, no, you can hold my passport and I'll run around and I won't travel?
Yes, certainly. I also read about that, and it certainly seems like a bit of a grey area. If his attorneys had approached the South African authorities and said, listen, I need to appear in a German criminal court, and accordingly I must be allowed to travel to attend to those proceedings, I don't see that there would have been any denial of him being handed his passport in order to attend to the proceedings in Germany. So certainly the German authorities and the German court which issued the warrant of arrest would have considered this, and they would have found that the excuse that he's not allowed to travel and that the South African authorities are in possession of his passport was not a valid excuse, and accordingly the warrant was issued. He has not been arrested in South Africa yet. He has not appeared in a South African court yet. There is, to my mind, an investigation that is ongoing. But so the reasons forwarded by his German attorney in my mind, are not strong enough in order for the German court to then not issue that warrant of arrest, which has now been issued.
So there is no official word, of course, from the Hawks or any of those places, but it's seemingly, as you put it, there is an investigation and there is an expected indictment that will come out of this investigation. Have you ever heard of that, where the police say, we're investigating you and there's a good chance that we will indict you, and so give us your passport so that you don't travel? Does that happen?
Not very frequently, to be honest. It's also a limitation on a person's a right to movement. So the South African police, should they do that, they would be infringing on his constitutional rights in South Africa if they insist on taking possession of his passports. Unless some sort of arrangement has been made, which would be an unofficial arrangement because he has not been charged with any criminal offences here, that certainly is not a frequently seen occurrence here in South Africa, to be honest.
Now, the red notice, talk to me about it. If then the German authorities, that's what they choose to do, does it now therefore compel the local authorities to arrest Markus Jooste?
So that all depends on the mutual legal assistance between the two countries and whether there is an extradition treaty that has been reached between the two countries. Now, it is a fact that in Germany, should a South African or a person who's wanted in relation to a crime in South Africa is arrested in Germany, they would not extradite that person to South Africa. They have laws which prevent them from extraditing any German national to a country outside of the European Union. However, South Africa would be inclined to extradite a South African if he is wanted in Germany on criminal charges. But there's a whole process that needs to be followed with any extradition. Firstly, it must be determined whether the charges that have been leveled against the person, in this instance Markus Jooste, are valid charges in Germany. What are the chances of a successful prosecution there? And would there be any infringement of Markus Jooste's human rights if he were to be extradited to Germany? In other words, is it merely a witch hunt, or is there really substance in the charges that he is faced with? And those are all factors that would need to be considered by a South African court should he be arrested here and pending his extradition to Germany on those charges. It's a lengthy application that would have to be sent by the German authorities to South Africa, and one would have to wait and see whether it does indeed reach that stage. There are numerous hurdles that they would need to overcome now, such as approaching Interpol, having the red notice issued, having that red notice circulated. These things take a lot of time, and then of course being able to effect a valid arrest warrant in South Africa to take him into custody with the intention of extraditing him to Germany. So, as I said before, one would have to now wait and see, given that an arrest warrant has been issued, whether he does cooperate with the German authorities in conjunction with the South African authorities, obviously, which would allow him to travel to Germany to face those charges, or whether he will chance his luck in South Africa. And, if that red notice does arrive in South Africa, then fight it on that basis.
So it does seem from the reporting that this stems from a sham transaction totaling 839 million euros that reflected as sales profits in a 2011 results of Steinhoff's sister company, Tau Enterprises, and bolstered the group's consolidated balance sheet. And this involves a player or a former banker in Geneva. So it does this in a way, if is not executed, hamper the proceedings of that particular matter that Germany is looking at?
Yes, certainly, and the German authorities would have to make a decision there whether they wish to proceed against the other accused in that matter and, in effect, separate the trials of Markus Jooste from the other accused trials, or whether they would want to prosecute them together. Should they insist on all of the accused being present in the German court in order for them successfully prosecute the matter, then they would have to wait and the proceedings would be delayed until Markus Jooste does in fact appear personally in Germany in that court. So that is a decision that the German prosecution and the German authorities would have to make. If it hampers their case tremendously that Markus Jooste is not being charged together with the other accused, then they would have to wait for him to be present in Germany before they can proceed. And one would now have to wait and see whether they have enough evidence which is strong enough to convict the other accused in the absence of Markus Jooste, or whether they want to wait for him to be in Germany before they proceed.
Now, these mutual cooperation arrangements, I mean, are they cast in stone, or do they go based on geopolitical tensions and whatever is happening between South Africa and what's happening elsewhere in the world? Because, for example, we had some kind of a mutual agreement arrangement with the UAE for the extradition of the Guptas, but maybe it's our fault, but it seems to be not working well. South Africa was fuming to hear that their request was just willy-nilly rejected without them being called in to come and stand trial and so on and so forth. Are these things kind of liquid, or are they standard in terms of how they should be carried out?
Yes, there are, of course, numerous international political factors that play a role in a mutual legal assistance treaty between countries. There are, of course, countries that South Africa have no such treaties in place, and where there's no understanding that there will be any assistance should it come to an instance like this. But the German-South African Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty is quite strong, and one would expect the authorities to cooperate with each other should it come to that point. But one must also remember that the arrested person also has rights, and that the mere fact that there is mutual legal assistance and there is treaties between two different countries does not mean that he should just automatically be extradited. He has a right to also present his case and to also say, well, for instance, the charges leveled against him in Germany amount to being a witch hunt. There's no evidence that actually links him to any crimes there, and accordingly the South African authorities must dismiss such a extradition application. And once again, we would have to wait and see what such an application entails and whether the South African authorities agree to that. There have been well-known extraditions that have taken place. The most high-profile one was, of course, Shreen Diwani, that was extradited from the UK to South Africa to stand trial in South Africa for the murder of his wife. And there, the mutual legal assistance agreement and treaty between the countries stood firm, and the proper procedures were put in place, and a proper application was made. And the UK courts found that, yes, there's a strong case that he is faced with in South Africa and he should be extradited. On the other hand, Australia, there was a famous case in the Sydney High Court in 2004, which also was pertaining to an extradition of an Australian citizen to South Africa to face criminal charges here. And the court found that, if there's a chance that a person is convicted in South Africa upon being extradited there and facing jail time, so in other words being imprisoned, that is as good as sending a person to his death sentence. And that related to the conditions of our prisons in South Africa at the time. And accordingly refused to extradite any person from Australia to South Africa to face charges here. So in any extradition, there are numerous factors that need to be taken into consideration. As you pointed out, the international politics between the countries is definitely one that comes into play. But the strength of the case and whether there is strong enough evidence which links the person to the offence having been committed in that country, and in this instance Germany, should play the most important role on whether a decision is taken to extradite that person or not.
Let's just finally look at this. Can South Africa in turn go to Germany and say, look, we also want this particular individual on these particular charges. We're very close to our investigation and we think we are going to be successful, and therefore, no, we will not extradite him at this point until he has faced these charges here at home? Yes,
certainly. I've been involved in big matters where specifically between Germany and South Africa, where there was extensive mutual legal assistance, and the different justice departments spoke to each other transparently and openly and freely. And if that were to be the case, then one could expect the Germans then to say, okay, well, if you want to prosecute him in South Africa, then let's put a time limit on that. And should he be arrested and that trial should commence, then we will separate the trials of the matter in Germany. And once the trial in South Africa is finalized, we will then again recommence with our proceedings against him in Germany. Whether he's in custody here or serving a sentence, a prison sentence here or not, that would obviously come into play once the proceedings are finalized in South Africa. But the difficulty at the moment is that, we are not even aware in South Africa whether a criminal docket has in fact been opened here, where Markus Jooste is an accused or a suspect. And certainly, the German authorities would say, well, we are ready to go and to proceed here in Germany. So we want to start commencing with the proceedings to get him here so that we can finalize this trial.
Right.
One we now have to wait and see whether the South African authorities do, come to the fore and say, well, criminal proceedings are going to be instituted shortly here. But again, we've heard nothing of that sort thus far.
Ulrich Roux, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. That's Ulrich there, helping us understand this latest development in the Markus Jooste matter.